This podcast is brought to you by Podcast Nation.
Welcome to Officially Influenced. I'm your host, Clio founder of Bouge Media and Podcast Nation. This podcast is for creators looking to amplify their message. We're pulling back the curtain on an often mysterious industry to share the insights you need to grow your brand. Let's get into it. Welcome to the very first episode of Officially Influenced. I'm your host, Clio and I'm the co-founder of Bouge Media and Podcast Nation. And to be honest, feels a little weird having a mic in my hand as I'm usually behind the scenes. And I'll admit that public speaking is definitely not something that comes naturally to me. But also, I guess, who likes to hear themselves speak? Well, maybe if I had a cool, British or Australian accent. But I don't. Although being behind the scenes is where I'm more comfortable. I've been wanting to create a space that shares the knowledge of what goes on behind the curtain to help creators better monetize and grow their business. And that's the goal of this podcast. Like most industries, there's so many moving parts when it comes to getting deals across the finish line. And creators are often shielded from much of it so that they can focus on what they do best. But you know what they say? Knowledge is power. And I really believe that understanding how brands and partners think is key. And hopefully that means that you can focus your energy in the right place. So one of the tips that we give our clients is to narrow down your niche. So with Officially Influenced, our content is going to be very intentional and very targeted to this industry. We want to share industry insights with you that is making this entire ecosystem stronger. And after over a decade of growing along with this industry, and let me tell you, it feels like this is an industry that is ever evolving. It's changing so quickly, and we've been constantly learning from the people that we work with. So whether it's from creators, brands, experts, it's time that we share our knowledge and share those conversations for you to benefit from too. We are all in this crazy creator world together. With all that being said, I couldn't think of a better place to start this podcast than with my business partner, Nadine. And not only am I incredibly lucky to have her as one of my very best friends and as my business partner, but she's actually also the reason that Podcast Nation exists. So together today, we're going to dive into what we do at Bouge Media and Podcast Nation because people get a little bit confused, and also what you can expect from this podcast. Nadine, here we are.
Here we are.
Also, I'm going to put it out there right away. I call you Dino. And so if I say Dino, but I'm going to try to keep it to Nadine.
You know what? You can do Dino
okay,
now that
perfect.
It's disclosed.
We are doing this podcast and now we have committed. I'm actually really excited about it. And I think that we will be able to provide some good value for our listeners.
I hope so.
We're going to get into it, but since the essence of this podcast is to explore the power of influence, what does influence mean to you?
I've thought a little bit about this. I think that to me, the biggest influence is authenticity. I think anyone and everyone can see authenticity or inauthenticity. So that applies to whether you're a creator, whether you're a podcaster, whether you're just a regular human being, is being authentic to yourself, I think is really contagious and really influential.
Couldn't agree more. And I think that this is going to be a very common theme throughout this podcast, just in general, asking people about influence and doing a bit of research for this project. That is something that has come up over and over again. It's just being authentic and being yourself and just being true to yourself. Okay, so we're going to be very candid here, and we already recorded this podcast. This is take number, three.
It actually take number three.
Number three.
First take, we forgot to press record. Second take, our producers told us it just wasn't good.
So now
you know what? There's
again.
a reason that we are behind the scenes.
Right, exactly. I've really realized that, but we're still going to try to do this. But third time is a charm. And I think the main feedback that we got from our producers were like, it just sounds like this is a business meeting.
And like our worst business meeting.
Quite boring.
Not even a good one.
So we're going to try a bit of a different approach. And I think this isn't going to be what this podcast is about, but one of the things that they really suggested, and I was like, wait, that's a good place to start, is who we are and how Bouge Media came to be.
That's a long story.
Some of the crazy stories that maybe we are just used to or find boring, but I do think it's a good place to start and to kind of talk about the evolution of how Bouge Media came to be. Who is Podcast Nation? How are they related? We've been in it. It's been a grind and we've just been head down, but this will be a good opportunity to do a little bit of a recap, get people to understand who we are. And then we're going to go over what we're really hoping that our listeners will get out of this podcast moving forward.
Hopefully people won't be too judgmental from some of the stories. Early days.
We have some pretty crazy ones. And I guess this is what makes the ride so much fun. Maybe not fun at the time, but we can look back at it and laugh. So maybe the best place to start is I'll give a really quick overview in terms of Bouge Media. So I started Bouge Media in 2019, but no, it's 2009. 2009. It's crazy to think that we've been doing this for about 16 years. And Nadine and I actually know each other from working at Cactus Club, which is a restaurant in Vancouver. So we work together. Dino kind of keeps a little bit more to herself, very focused at work. She's not messing around. And now, if you know her, like I call her my coconut. She's very hard on the outside, but she's so soft on the inside. So if you can get through, then but it's so rewarding. One day we were closing. There was you, me, and our other friend, Michelle, and we were the last three. We were closing the restaurant down and we were cashing out upstairs. And we actually ended up having a conversation. I think it was probably because there wasn't a lot of people. You were just tired. You opened up and you went to the bathroom to get changed out of your server gear. And I look over at Michelle and I was like, she's actually really awesome. And Michelle's like, I
Shocking.
know. Yeah. I was like, she's so nice. She actually talks more than a few words. No, I never thought that. But like, I just hadn't gotten to know you. And so we're like, we should see if she wants to come to Vegas with us. We were going to Vegas in 3 days. And I was like, no chance that she's going to say yes. But I'm like, we may as well ask. You come out of the bathroom. We're like, well, you want to come to Vegas with us in 3 days? And you're like, well, I'm working, but if we can get my shifts covered, then I'll come. So all three of us started messaging everyone. And here we are 3 days later at the airport. We took a picture with Snoop Dogg.
It was probably like your 10th time in Vegas that year.
Yeah. My last name was De La Vega. Really loved Vegas. And that was really the beginning of our friendship. And so we worked together. And then when I started Bouge Media, I was like, well, Nadine's really smart. And I'm like, I'm going to see if you were interested. And you were one of the first employees at Bouge Media. And I guess like there's just a couple stories
there's more. There's more than a couple.
We really started, I had no funding. I was 24. I had no idea what I was doing. Grassroots. And none of us did. There was 2 other servers at Cactus Club that I recruited.
We only hired
a lot
Cactus
of
Club servers.
Yeah. And then also my sister.
Also a Cactus Club server.
Also a Cactus Club, yeah. So all of us, that was a requirement. And we had a round table at my apartment. I was living with my sister at the time. And that was our Bouge Media office. And, we just tried to make a go of it. And you girls were amazing because, I've said this before, but there's no way that Bouge Media or Podcast Nation would exist today if it weren't for you girls. There was multiple times where it was time to pay you girls. And there was no money in the bank account because we were waiting for our clients to pay. And they obviously probably didn't realize how
tight things were
and how much we were expecting the paychecks when they were due. So there's multiple occasions where I did tell you girls, I was like, is there any way you can hold off a few more days? And who else would do that? Like you really believed.
Like, okay, here we go.
Sure. You know what? Let's all make dinner together and we can pool what we have. But like now thinking of those days, it's like, it makes me love you girls even more, but also just like the whole process, the journey of where we are today.
But how resilient were you in that? Like everyone else would have had a nervous breakdown if they were trying to make payroll and no one was paying and they had to like, that's tough.
Like a little naive. Yeah, it was definitely stressful. And then there was a turning point where we landed an amazing client. They're a really reputable residential firm. So when we started Bouge Media, what we were doing is social media for businesses. It was the very, very early days where businesses were trying to figure out how to promote on Facebook. I mean, Instagram wasn't even around. It really was Facebook, LinkedIn, and we would help create content, post on social media. And obviously it evolved quite a bit when we ended up getting a big residential
real estate
client, developer. Yeah. And we ended up going to their office. We got a meeting and it was, like full big office, big pitch. We were ready, got dressed for this interview. We're trying to make ourselves look older. And we go into this boardroom where there's about 15 seats. There's the president of the company, president of the residential side. And we did it and we get a call back and they were interested. And they said, yeah, like, we'd love to have a second meeting. I think that there's something here and we'd love to work with you guys, but I'll come to you. I was like, no worries at all. Like, we'll definitely come to you. And he's like, oh no, I'll already be downtown. I'd like to see your office. And like completely blanked. I was like, okay, sounds good. He's like, send me an invite and the address. I'm still sweating actually.
Thinking about it.
Oh my God, thinking about it. Like now we know him and he was so great, but just like my stomach dropped. I told you girls and everyone was like blank stare, be like, what do we do? Action mode.
You have to visualize the apartment at the time. It wasn't just an apartment, but it was like the girliest apartment you can imagine. There was just like faux fur, sparkles, like quotes on the wall. Like it just could not be.
Those fake flowers, like, peonies. Oh yeah, so girly. So we're like, first of all, we need to fully redecorate the office and make it look professional,
like an office.
Which is also crazy because we were in a residential.
It was also just an apartment.
It was an apartment in a residential building. So we borrowed artwork from friends. Everyone that day wore like heels on their shoes.
Seems so strange now. We don't even dress like that now.
No, we had like pin skirts. Is that what they call them?
They had what is it called? We don't even know what they're called anymore. Like to your knees, you mean?
Yes, that were like,
what
with
is
the
called, Abby?
Like a tube skirt? Or
like pins.
Pencil.
Pencil.
Don't even know the name of them.
That out. We're taking that out. We were wearing pencil skirts and
heels.
And so the two rooms were bedrooms. So we were pretending like the girls were going into the office. But they were just bedrooms.
I think I was in the solarium with Tiffany is where I was. That's where I was assigned to. Through the kitchen. I don't know if we can use this. I don't know.
We landed the account. Yeah. Oh my God. It was so
we
funny.
Did. Shockingly.
Yeah. I have respect.
I mean, we should have just said we'll meet you at a coffee shop in hindsight.
Yes. No, but I did. Remember, I tried to say, I was like, oh, we'll meet you at a coffee shop. And he's like, no, I would. And that's when he said, I would like to see your office. So
I mean, that's how we kept our prices low. No overhead.
You were not wasting your money. Any other funny stories that really make you think of like, wow, we really went through it?
One thing I was thinking about driving over here was having to be models, which I use that term very lightly. We are not models in our own photo shoots because we often would only get a certain budget from these businesses that were hiring us to do their social media. And so we didn't have any budget to hire models. So we would have to, be the subjects. We'd have to try to disguise our faces so that it wasn't obvious that it was our team members in all these photos. And it was just like the bottom of someone's chin.
And it was us in like different brands, but it was like us again.
Different outfits. This is a few years after the start of Bouge. And I think it might have been Grace at the time, who was the operations manager of Bouge. And she asked me if I would pose for a photo for one of their clients. At this point, the business was established a little bit more. For whatever reason, they didn't have this one model for this campaign that they were going to be doing. They had a photo shoot. They were going to be running paid ads on Facebook, I think. And so Grace asked me, she's like, do you mind? And I wasn't ready to be on camera, but I'm like, you know what? I'll put my ego aside and whatever I look like right now, no one I know is ever going to see this. And who cares, right? Turns out they ran that ad campaign in my hometown. And everyone that I knew and grew up with started seeing me as the print model for this brand all through my hometown, which is a small town. So everybody knows everybody.
You know what? And you didn't even get paid for that. And then
I mean, I don't even care about
really
that.
Really regretted that.
No, I'm not trying to be a model.
It's like all of those stories, now we can look back and laugh. But in the moment, you're just grinding it out. You're just doing what you can do.
Yeah.
And so with Bougie Media, we grew that into a digital marketing agency.
Mm-hmm.
We started doing websites and branding. And then naturally within that space, we were doing a lot of event marketing. And then we got really involved in the influencer side. This is crazy. Like this is when bloggers came up, and then bloggers then turned Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And the first influencer that we ever worked with was Jillian Harris. So Jillian Harris was one of the bachelorettes, and she had an incredible presence online. Like she's so smart. She's such a hustler, and she had started a side business, and she had hired us to help her. And that was really the first time that I saw the power of influence and how one person can move the needle and be so influential. And I found it fascinating. Like I thought it was so interesting. And then we started working with Caitlin Bristow, who was a bachelorette a few seasons after Jillian, and having seen what Jillian had done. And we had known Caitlin for a long time, and we're like, we always knew she was going to be famous. You're like, you have the star power, that it factor. She's so magnetic. And we're like, you will be famous one day. And then found out she was going on the show. Actually, funny enough, I think there's a recurring theme here because I'm pretty sure we were in Vegas when we found out.
Good chance you were in Vegas when anything happened.
Chance that we found out when she said, she's like, I think I'm going to be on the show. And so, you know, we were talking about it, and I was like, you got to be so strategic about this. You can do things right. Jillian Harris was a perfect example. And talk about someone who is authentic and unapologetically themselves. Like that is Caitlin's tagline. And that is why she became America's sweetheart and Bachelor Nation sweetheart, is because even though she wasn't what you would call America's sweetheart, she really was breaking the mold and being herself. And I think it was at a time that was so refreshing, because it was that time, you know, where everything on Instagram was super polished and super curated. And obviously it's evolved so much, but I actually see Caitlin as a really part of that movement where people started to just
pull back the curtain a bit,
and, you know, cry on Instagram and tell them like life isn't perfect, you know? So with her, I started a couple of different businesses that were offshoots, you know, of Bougie Media. We did Do Edit, which was a scrunchie line, and that also really showcased the power of influence there. And then Wine, Spade, and Sparrows. And then as things were evolving, like we stopped working together for a little bit, and we started, like you said, this tech company. That is a whole other story, a whole other podcast. We can skip over that. But what we really knew was that we want to keep working together. Like we can't imagine not.
No.
So we're like, what's going to be our next
business?
We didn't
skip a beat. We just came right back into another business.
We're like, what's next? It just has to be together. And that's where the evolution of Podcast Nation came. And you're the one who introduced me to podcasts. I had actually never really heard about podcasts. And this was, I don't know, maybe 2014. I don't even remember what year, but it was when Serial had come out. And that was the first podcast I listened to. And then honestly, it didn't stick for me. Like I just didn't.
You were busy.
I was busy. I was out doing things. I was in Vegas. But then the podcast world got reintroduced when I worked with Caitlin. And she has a really big, awesome podcast called Off the Vine. And we were part of shopping around and trying to find a right network for her. And then we found that there was an opportunity in the space because we were coming from the agency side where it wasn't one size fits all. And we thought that that would be a really good model in the podcast space. I would love to hear how you started listening to podcasts and what about it is it that you love so much?
I think for me, social media has always been as powerful as it can be. It's always been a bit surface in a sense, like it is consumed really quickly in a few quick moments, whether it's a picture, whether a quick video. And podcast, I think, get to a deeper level. I think you get to know a host, even if a podcast is a more narrative show and it's not about the host's personal opinions or life or anything. Having someone's voice in your ears for, you know, a 10 episode series or every day for 3 years, like depends on the type of podcast, like you feel just so connected to the content and the host in a way that social media to me doesn't connect in that same deep way. There's a place for both. They both have their strengths and weaknesses for sure. But I don't know, I liked that kind of deeper story.
For sure. When you listen to someone that you really resonate with, there is a different connection than when you're watching as well, which you would think would be the opposite. But I think you're more focused in a way. You're not as distracted.
Yeah. I don't know what it is, but there's something about listening to me.
Yeah. So then we started Podcast Nation. And how have you seen this industry evolve in the last 5 years?
I think when we first started it, I believe it was 2019, we took on our first show. And luckily that same show is still with us, which is great. But in 2019, which is almost 7 years ago now. And at the time, I mean, I think we were lucky to get in when we did because we truthfully didn't know the space. We didn't know the industry. We just thought, hey, we can maybe figure this out. And we can figure it out in a way that perhaps other podcast agencies or podcast networks weren't necessarily coming from the same angle as us. They were often coming from the radio world, which, had its own strengths, but coming from the social and influencer side, I think we just thought about things differently. At the time, I mean, it was the Wild West in a sense. It still is in a lot of ways. The industry has evolved a ton, but it's changing all the time. We were joking actually internally the other day. We keep on trying to get ahead and get on top of writing manuals for things because every time a team member joins and we have to reteach somebody how to say, be a producer or be in ad ops or be in sales. We're kind of starting from scratch of trying to train people. But the problem is the industry changes so quickly that if we wrote a manual in 3 months, it would be sort of irrelevant. The technologies change. The technologies have advanced immensely in terms of the sponsorship side of things. So it's brought in so much more money and brand interest in the podcast space because brands can track effectively on the podcast they're advertising on, which allows podcasts to be just funded better. The more brands that kind of come into the space and are willing to invest in podcasters, the more content that can be created because it all costs money. It costs money to be a host of a podcast. It is a job. Yeah. You are your own business in a sense. Producers cost money, space costs money, editors cost money, everything, design. So it's not a free venture in a sense. And so the brand recognition of the power of influence of the podcast space has really blossomed, I would say, in the last 7 years.
It's actually crazy because the first couple of years, we always referenced this industry as the Wild, Wild West. Everyone did. You'd get on a call and we're like, oh, we're in the Wild, Wild West.
Yeah.
But I no longer feel that way. There's a lot of tools and support, and the industry is very collaborative.
Very evolved now.
And that's not in a long time. That's just in a few short years. I'd love to dive into our differentiator as a network, but I couldn't believe, I think last week we had a call with someone and we're talking about our business and they were asking oh, how are you different as a network? And I think we have an idea, but we don't actually really know. And you said, well, Clio and I have never worked in the podcast industry before starting this. And actually, no one that we work with has ever worked in the podcast industry.
None of our employees.
It's a new industry. We just really focused on hiring people that had the right skill sets.
The right natural skill sets.
The right natural skill sets. And then we knew that
they could be trained.
They could be trained. Some came from Bouge Media, some came from other ventures, or some, we just knew that they would be great hires. But I think that really does differentiate us because we don't know how other people do it. So we have done everything the way that we feel is the right way, whether it's the right way or not. And it might change again. But how would you say we differentiate from other networks out there?
Yeah. I mean, I think in that sense, we haven't pigeonholed our assumptions of how something must be done. And I think I say this to our team all the time I challenge everyone to question how we do things, whether it's a production process or whether it's a sales strategy, whatever that may be, just because that's the way that you were shown how to do it when you started with us or the way that we've been doing it for however long. That doesn't mean it's the best way or the right way to do it. And so I think we're relatively small in this industry, and it allows us to be nimble by having that mindset. And I think we've been really lucky to bring people on our team that are willing to have that mindset and willing to challenge the status quo and to push us further. And no one's coming in with like, oh, this is the way you have to do this. This is the way that this is always done in this space, because we've, figured it out from the ground up. So I'm sure maybe in some ways it's slowed us down because we haven't had that basis of knowledge.
For sure.
But at the same time, I also think that it's built team members that feel ownership of what we have built because they have been here through the thick and thin of the process and the development of our company.
I mean, we always talk about how much we appreciate our team. We call our team Team Perfect because they're incredible and we're so grateful for them. But that almost brings me a new level of appreciation for the commitment that they all had and the patience as well to like, we're all figuring this out together. No one has the answer.
Yeah.
So just a shout out to our team. Team Perfect. Okay, so a couple more questions here before we get into a rapid fire. What makes a podcast influence unique versus social media influence?
I think what we were talking about before of it being kind of deeper and the long form content is you can just get to a deeper level than you can on social media. And I think they can support each other. But to me, it's more long lasting. Yeah. It's more authentic. Maybe it's not more authentic, but I think that you can get to a more authentic place with the long form.
What do you see for Podcast Nation or for podcast trends in 2026? Or what are you excited about?
I think there's been a lot of rumblings of live events coming back, which I think is really exciting. We've been fortunate to be a part of some live podcast events in the past, and they are just such great community builders. I think that comes with the territory of podcasts. The people who listen to a podcast week in and week out are really such a strong community for that creator, and for them to be able to be in a room and actually connect with their audience in a different way, I think is so powerful. It adds an element that we've been missing. Obviously with COVID, live events sort of dried up and then everyone's just been trying to kind of find their bearings after that. But I think live events will be back in full force.
People are craving that.
Yeah.
That will be fun. So we're going to be doing a segment with all of our guests, and it's going to be called Influenced by You. So you are the first person doing the segment.
Am I influencing people?
Well, you actually might be. Yeah, of course.
Maybe.
Yeah. What's your favorite podcast right now? Maybe you'll influence someone to listen to yours.
I mean, it's a very popular podcast, so I don't know if it needs my my support. But my go-to has been for a while, The New York Times The Daily. It's a bit different content than we typically work with. So obviously I listen to all of our shows as well, but it's a great way to stay on top of news and current events, which is, I think, very important.
Very important. Nice, quick format. What's a podcast episode that recently changed your perspective?
Oh, good question. You know what? This wasn't necessarily so recent, but the first one that comes to mind, there's a podcast called Ear Hustle. Have you heard of it?
Ear Hustle, yes.
Ear Hustle.
I've listened to it.
Have you?
Yeah.
It's produced inside a prison. So it's essentially stories of prisoners in different capacities. I don't even know if I could pick a specific episode, but I think that it speaks to the power of audio and the long form, authentic content that you get into the deep stories and learning essentially why the prisoners are in the first place and the backstory and the human story behind, their crimes, essentially. I think it is powerful in reminding people that there's complexity to maybe something that you would be very judgmental.
That's such a good one. I haven't listened to that one in so long. I remember I had recommended to Adam.
Oh, you did?
Husband,
Yeah.
because he loves anything that happens in jail. Yeah. So it's such an interesting concept and a great concept for a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Who influences you?
I think that I can be influenced by people that I see living authentically, which maybe I sound like a broken record at this point, but that can mean somebody who is a really bold creator and they kind of go against the grain and they create something inspiring and wonderful for the world that the world has never seen something like that before. Or it can mean somebody that's like really confident living a really quiet, normal, simple life. I think of my mom and dad and the life they live, and they're just so happy with the simple pleasures of like being grandparents and gardening, and they've never wanted fame or fortune, and they couldn't be happier. So I think, and you're neither better doing one or the other. Both are great. There's no judgment on it. But I think to really think of what's going to create the happiest human experience for you and lean into that just for nothing else other than living your best life and not needing to try and be anyone else.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that's...
I love that. That's a great answer. And I bet it's going to be very different than any other answer we get. So this is great. I like it. Variety. Just to close it up, what are you hoping that people will get from this podcast?
I think a big thing that comes up when we talk to influencers on the social side or podcast hosts is they don't quite know, obviously, what goes on behind the scenes of the industries that they're in. And I think transparency is really helpful. I think that it's helpful to know what questions you should ask, what you can ask, what expectations for having line of sight on your payments, having line of sight on your contracts. Knowledge is power, and hopefully we can give a little knowledge.
Absolutely. This is your business, but it's really hard to make smart decisions when you don't understand the full picture.
Absolutely.
The whole point of this isn't to become the biggest podcast, but we just really wanted to add value to the right people and the people that we get to speak with on an everyday basis at work.
I love that.
Was this as scary as you thought it was going to be?
No, it's fine.
That's fine. You did
It's
great.
fine.
You did great, Dina.
Okay.
Are you sure you don't want to be a co-host?
Definitely not. No, we divide and conquer.
Okay. Well, Nadine and I will be back to talk about what it looks like to start a podcast. I'm going to ask you all the questions we get from future podcasters or people that are looking to join a network. So more to come. And thank you so much for being here on the very first episode of Officially Influenced.
Thank you.
Tune in next week to hear my conversation with Ashley Freeborn. She's the founder of Smash and Tess, which is a female-owned and operated clothing company that empowers women to live big lives with ease and confidence. You might have seen celebrities rock their rompers on Instagram, and we actually dive in and talk about the exciting collaborations that she did with celebrities like Hilary Duff, Jillian Harris, Caitlin Bristow, and also what it looks like for them to create capsule collections with influencers. We also talk about why you should just post it. So make sure to tune in. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Officially Influenced podcast. Don't forget to follow along on your favorite podcast app and leave a rating, review. We really would be so grateful. For more insights, make sure you're following us on social at Officially Influenced. And I definitely wanted to give a shout out to my team at Podcast Nation and Bouge Media for all of their help, because this podcast wouldn't be here without them. Thanks again, and see you next time.